My parents built their dream house around the time I was 8 years old. I remember it having large rooms and long hallways. My room felt the furthest away from everyone else, which never bothered me, as I felt I had plenty of space to myself. I'd always stay up late playing video games and never worry about waking my parents up. I don't remember when it started. I may have been around the age of 10. I would occasionally have this dream where a voice would call out my name,
James.
And I would then wake up in my bed. Upon looking around my room, everything was just as I had left it before falling asleep. James. I'd hear it again calling out from somewhere in the house. The voice sometimes would sound like my mother and other times sound like my father. I distinctly remember feeling an overwhelming sense of dread as I would just sit there listening to it, periodically calling out my name. I never got out of bed to investigate. Eventually, I'd wake up feeling exhausted, as if I was up the whole night. This dream would happen randomly throughout the next year. There was no rhyme or reason for when it would occur. One morning at breakfast, I asked my mom if she ever woke up late and yelled for me. She looked at me a bit confused. Well, why would I do that? I'd just come and wake you up if it was something important. I decided to tell her about the reoccurring dream I was having and how it has been wearing on me. She paused for a few minutes and then asked me, well, have you ever gotten up to see what or whoever it is and what they want? I shook my head no and remained silent. She told me whenever I find myself in that dream, to ask it what it wants or to tell whoever it is to leave me alone. A few weeks have passed, and our conversation had almost slipped my mind, until one night I found myself waking up to a voice calling out from somewhere inside the house, James. This time sounding like my mother's voice. I knew I was in the dream. I let it call out again and mustered the courage to yell back, "What do you want?" It did not respond. Sitting there for what felt like forever, I waited for a response, but still, nothing. Deciding to break the silence, I yell, "Go away! Leave me alone!" Immediately, a voice I do not recognize calls out to me from just outside my bedroom door. With a much softer tone, it says,
"Hey, come here."
A stifling fear came over me as the proximity of the voice is now only a few feet away. After a moment sitting there frozen staring at my feet, my eyes wander towards the door. That's when I see it. An eye peeking at me from the edge of the door. This does not look like a person, more like a long finger with an eye at the end of it, peering at me from the dark of the hallway. I tried to scream, but nothing would come out. Even my breath felt stuck in my chest. I kept fighting to scream until eventually I woke myself up, screaming my head off. It was still dark outside, but I was finally awake and free of that terrible dream. I heard footsteps fumbling loudly downstairs. My mom calls out with a worried tone, "James, are you okay?" Feeling relieved, I leapt out of bed and raced down to tell my mother about the dream I just had. Just as I exit my room, another wave of dread comes over me. I slowly turn to look back into my room. And there it is. The eye looking at me from around the corner of my door. We are almost face to face. I turn to run for the stairs, hearing this thing racing down the hallway right after me. I remember feeling it grab me and knock me to the floor. Everything at this point is pitch black, and I can feel myself being dragged back towards my room. I started slamming my fists off the floor, reaching and grabbing for anything to stop myself, until the hard floor started to feel like pillows and blankets. I again find myself waking back up in my bed, still night, as if nothing had happened. I stared at the clock in my room. Morning wasn't far away, so I sat and waited for the sun to rise. The sun eventually comes up, and I hear everyone in the house start their morning. I cautiously go downstairs and tell my mom about the dream. She went to her closet and dug around for a bit, eventually bringing me an old dream catcher. She told me to hang it by my window and it would help me sleep. I don't know if it was a placebo effect or not, but afterwards, I never had the dream again while living in that house. I am now in my early 40s and had long forgotten about that dream. Just recently, I set an alarm for 3:30 a.m. to get up for a work trip. I ended up waking up before the alarm went off and was relieved I could sleep a bit longer. As I went to lay back down, an odd feeling washed over me. I live with my girlfriend, but she was not with me that night. After a brief moment of silence, an odd but familiar voice calls out, "James."
I found you.